In a world ruled not by truth, but by perception, stupidity is not always loud or obvious. It doesn't wear a clown's mask. It often wears a smile, a handshake, a compliment. It hides in pride, disguised as certainty, and in kindness offered without caution. The stupid man is not just naive, he is dangerous. Not because he intends harm, but because he cannot recognize it, not even when he causes it himself. And the danger runs deeper than most realize. Because true stupidity is not a lack of intelligence. It is the refusal to evolve, the fear of self-examination, the instinct to blame the world instead of looking in the mirror. Today, we reveal 6 brutal signs of a stupid man, not to insult, but to protect, not to mock, but to awaken. Because these traits, if left unchecked, don't just ruin reputations. They destroy futures. And here's the truth Machiavelli warned us about. A prince surrounded by fools will become one himself. So whether you're leading a team, navigating a relationship, or simply building your identity, recognizing these signs could be the difference between staying weak and becoming untouchable. Let's begin. Sign 1. He can't control his emotions. You've seen him before. The man who calls himself kind, but it's not kindness. It's fear, dressed in virtue. He apologizes when he's done nothing wrong. He laughs nervously when someone disrespects him. He says yes when every part of him wants to say no. And he convinces himself this is compassion, that being soft makes him strong. But here's the Machiavellian truth. In a world ruled by perception, not truth, softness without strategy is suicide. Predators don't look for evil. They look for weakness. And what appears to be unlimited goodness is, in reality, weakness in disguise. The man who can't say no, the one who forgives too quickly and tries to love everyone, becomes a magnet for those who only take and never give back. He believes that if he just gives more, tolerates more, sacrifices more, people will eventually recognize the purity of his heart. But the world doesn't reward unguarded goodness. It exploits it. In every workplace, family, and friend group, you'll find this man carrying more than his share, staying quiet when he should speak, endlessly accommodating, and endlessly overlooked. Why does this keep happening to him? Because he doesn't draw a line. He doesn't speak from strength. He confuses being agreeable with being honorable. But honor without boundaries isn't noble. It's invisible. And here's what most men don't understand. Respect is not earned through self-sacrifice. It's earned through self-command, not through being liked, but through being unshakable. Calm, not passive. Compassionate, but not permissive. The stupid man thinks he's building safety by avoiding conflict. But what he's really building is a reputation. The man you can walk over. The man who always understands, always forgives, always stays. And once you wear that identity long enough, it becomes your prison. So ask yourself, honestly, when you stay silent in the face of disrespect, when you swallow your emotions to avoid discomfort, when you mistake being passive for being kind, are you really being noble? Or are you just afraid to be powerful? Sign 2. He always thinks he's right. Some men fear failure. Others fear rejection. But the stupid man, he fears silence. You'll notice it the moment he enters a room. Words spill out before anyone asks. He offers opinions as if they're facts, advice as if it's law. He interrupts not to challenge, but to be noticed. And when no one listens, he doesn't speak more wisely. He just speaks louder. But here's the paradox. The more he tries to prove he's right, the more he reveals how deeply insecure he is. Watch him closely. He doesn't ask questions to learn. He performs. He shares ideas not to uncover truth, but to dominate the space. And behind every sentence is a fragile plea. Please, don't ignore me. Imagine him at a dinner table. He brings up every topic, politics, history, psychology, pretending expertise in all. He name-drops philosophers he's never truly read. He corrects others with shaky conviction. And when someone finally disagrees, he doesn't pause to reflect. He flares up, doubles down, and launches into a monologue. He doesn't seek dialogue. He demands submission. And when the room falls silent, not from respect but exhaustion, he mistakes that silence for admiration. But as Machiavelli would warn us, the most dangerous man in the room is never the loudest. It's the one who listens. Because real power isn't noisy. It observes. It waits. It calculates. The wise man can sit quietly for hours, not because he has nothing to say, but because he's not there to prove anything. He's there to understand everything. Meanwhile, the stupid man broadcasts unearned confidence. He thinks knowledge is about being fast, not precise. He reacts instead of responding. He brags before he acts. And because he speaks before he thinks, his words become weapons, used not by him, but against him. This is where so many men confuse authenticity with recklessness. Yes, vulnerability matters. But vulnerability without discernment is exposure. And exposure without purpose is weakness. So what truly drives him? It's not just arrogance. It's fear. The fear of being irrelevant, invisible, forgotten. That's why he overcompensates with noise. In his mind, silence means he's losing. But in reality, silence is often the first move of those who've already won. So, here's the question you must ask yourself. Do you speak to contribute or to compete? Because true power doesn't explain itself. It doesn't overshare. It doesn't beg to be liked. It simply moves and lets the world adjust. Sign 3. He craves validation. There's a certain kind of man who gives himself away, long before anyone even asks. He trusts too quickly, opens up too soon, and calls a stranger a brother, after just one compliment. And when asked why, he insists it's because he's just open-hearted. But don't be fooled. This isn't openness. It's hunger. A deep, aching need to be seen, accepted, and told, "You matter." And that need makes him blind. He hears flattery and assumes loyalty. He sees a smile and confuses it for sincerity. He trusts tone over character. And when betrayal finally comes, as it always does, he chalks it up to bad luck, as though the world conspired against his kindness. But kindness without caution is not virtue. It's vulnerability without armor. Picture this. A man at work receives praise from a new colleague. Instantly, he overshares, revealing his goals, insecurities, even fragments of his personal life. He believes he's building connection, but in truth, he's handing over ammunition before ever testing the weight of the other person's loyalty. And here lies the cruel irony. The more he chases validation, the more invisible he becomes. Because real trust must be earned, not assumed. It's built through consistency, revealed under pressure, proven over time. But the foolish man doesn't test. He projects. He wants so desperately to be seen as good. He never asks if the people around him are good enough to truly see him. This is why manipulators thrive on men like this. They know exactly what to say. They mimic warmth, offer the illusion of recognition, and once he's hooked, they own him. Not with force, but with flattery. The wise man, in contrast, is slow to open, not because he is cold, but because he understands a harsh truth. Attention is not connection, praise is not proof, and unearned kindness is often bait. So ask yourself, do you trust others because they've earned it, or because you need their approval to feel worthy? Because the moment you outsource your self-worth, you stop being a man and start becoming a puppet. Pulled by compliments, crushed by criticism, constantly adjusting yourself to fit into rooms you were never meant to enter. But here's the truth. You don't rise by being liked. You rise by being unshakable. And that journey begins the moment you stop begging the world to validate your worth and start living as if you already know it. Sign 4. He talks, but never listens. Some men speak to share, others speak to impress. But the stupid man speaks because he's terrified of becoming irrelevant. He doesn't just crave attention. He depends on it to feel real. That's why he fills every silence with noise. Not insight, not clarity, just sound. A stream of opinions, jokes, nervous agreements, and constant commentary. Anything to be liked, anything to avoid the sinking feeling of being unseen. But here's what he doesn't realize. When your words are desperate, your presence becomes forgettable. This man doesn't listen to understand. He listens to reply. He's not in conversation, he's in performance. Every gesture, every sentence, every laugh whispers the same question. Do you like me? His opinions shift mid-sentence to match the room. He agrees with views he doesn't believe in. He avoids confrontation not out of respect, but out of fear. And when he's finally challenged, he folds, not out of humility, but out of habit. This isn't diplomacy. It's emotional submission, disguised as social intelligence. Because a man who cannot stand firm in discomfort will always collapse under pressure. And ironically, his constant effort to be noticed makes him invisible. People nod when he speaks, but they don't remember him. Not because he lacked words, but because he lacked weight. His voice carried no conviction, only fear. The tragedy is that he mistakes being agreeable for being valuable. He thinks that by avoiding conflict, earning approval, and staying pleasant, he'll be safe. But safety purchased with silence isn't safety. It's self-erasure. It's a quiet kind of imprisonment. And this is where Machiavelli would offer brutal clarity. Respect is not born from volume. It's born from restraint. Not from blending in, but from standing alone. So ask yourself, are you adjusting your voice to fit every room? Or are you becoming the kind of man whose silence speaks louder than someone else's noise? Because those who speak only to be accepted are often the first to be forgotten. Sign 5. He lacks self-awareness. There's a silent danger, greater than ignorance, and that is the refusal to see yourself clearly. Some men live loudly, but leave no mark. Not because they lack intelligence or opportunity, but because they never stop to ask themselves the simplest question: why do I do what I do? The stupid man walks through life on autopilot. He reacts instead of chooses. He pleases instead of stands firm. He avoids instead of confronts. But he never reflects. He never notices the patterns that govern his failures, the emotional outbursts, the compulsive need to be helpful, the constant oversharing that leaves him exposed. And because he never observes himself, he repeats himself. He thinks he's being real, but real without reflection is just raw impulse. He calls it honesty, but it's just reactivity. He lashes out when offended, collapses when ignored, spirals when criticized, and then wonders why no one takes him seriously. Here's the painful truth. You cannot master what you refuse to observe. Self-awareness isn't overthinking. It's the discipline of pausing long enough to see your own patterns clearly, the subtle habits that sabotage your strength, people-pleasing that disguises itself as generosity, avoidance that dresses itself up as peacekeeping, oversharing that pretends to be connection. And the tragedy? He believes that being agreeable makes him virtuous, but in reality, it just makes him forgettable. People nod when he speaks, but they don't follow. They tolerate him, but they never truly respect him. Because respect isn't built on emotional displays, it's built on internal discipline, on the quiet power of a man who sees himself fully, especially when it hurts. As one leader once said, the unexamined life is not worth living. But worse than that is the examined life that's ignored. So, ask yourself, when was the last time you studied your own reactions? Not to justify them, not to defend them, but to truly ask, where did this come from? And is it serving the man I'm trying to become? Because until you do, you're not evolving. You're just repeating, louder, older, and more alone. Sign 6. He rejects brutal truths. The most dangerous lie a man can believe is the one he tells himself. The stupid man doesn't fear failure. He fears responsibility. Because responsibility demands change, and change demands effort. So when things fall apart, he never looks inward. He blames his boss, his upbringing, the government, his ex, anyone but the only person who actually had the power to shift the outcome, himself. He calls life unfair, but never asks, "What did I miss?" He interprets rejection as betrayal, but never considers, "Where did I fall short?" To him, every obstacle is an attack, never a mirror. And that is where his power ends. Because no man can grow in a world where everything is someone else's fault. This kind of man suffers, but learns nothing. He feels pain, but never examines it. He mistakes wounds for wisdom, as if suffering alone makes him deep. But pain that isn't processed becomes poison. And over time, that poison leaks into everything. His relationships, his work, his choices, his self-respect. Watch him under pressure. He moves impulsively, speaks before thinking, and retreats the moment things get uncomfortable. Every emotion becomes an excuse. Every weakness becomes someone else's fault. And those around him? They don't have to defeat him. They just have to stand back and watch him defeat himself. In Machiavellian terms, he is the most dangerous kind of man, not to others, but to himself. Predictable, easily provoked, emotionally exposed. He thinks he's hiding his insecurities, but in truth, he broadcasts them in every reaction. Because his identity is built not on courage, but on avoidance. Avoidance of pain, avoidance of truth, avoidance of the hard, necessary work of transformation. And here's the truth he refuses to accept. The world is not out to get him. It simply doesn't protect men who refuse to evolve. So ask yourself, when life humbles you, do you make excuses, or do you ask hard questions? Because only one of those roads leads to growth. Only one leads to power. You've now seen the 6 silent traits that define a foolish man, not to shame, but to awaken. Because stupidity isn't always loud or dramatic. Often, it's the quiet, repeated decisions we make every day, the ones that avoid discomfort, deny our flaws, and trade self-respect for temporary approval. A foolish man isn't doomed by a lack of intelligence. He's doomed by his refusal to evolve. He reacts, but never reflects. He feels deeply, but learns nothing. He blames everyone but the only person who holds the power to change his life, himself. Machiavelli understood something most men still resist. Stupidity is not a condition, it's a choice, just like power, just like clarity, just like self-respect. And the moment you choose responsibility over excuses, the moment you confront brutal truths instead of running from them, that's when the cycle breaks. That's when transformation begins. So ask yourself honestly, which of these 6 signs did you recognize? Not just in others, but in yourself. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's not just observe weakness, let's outgrow it, together. Because in a world filled with noise, confusion, and manipulation, only the self-aware rise. This is Psychology Insights. Thank you for watching. And remember, you cannot conquer the world until you first conquer yourself.